I just, okay, so we have recording started. I don't know if everybody has looked at the participants, but you can see if you click the right icon, who's online. And I want to start, as I always do, with introducing new members. Without catching you off guard, Adam, would you mind introducing yourself and telling a little about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Bill. And hi, everyone. I think that I recognize some of the faces. We probably ran into each other at one point or another. I'm currently at Moderna in clinical supplies planning. I've been here for a little bit over a month. And previously, I've been at Ensite, both on the consulting side, managing our US clients, and previously on the product side, managing the development of the Ensite suite for clinical trials.
So Adam, do you know Benjamin very well?
I do. So we actually started at the same company in Berlin. So yeah. Benjamin was my first boss, you could say, and mentor. Cool. Yeah.
I know you and he talk to each other now and then. So not sure if he knows you moved already, but really great. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Okay, well, thanks, Adam, and welcome. So if I'm sharing screen, hopefully everybody can see it, and just a quick rundown of the agenda. We just took care of the new member intro. So I'm gonna update people on our calendar of events for this year. Show a chat room that's on the BSMA website, which is almost ready to be launched, and I'll give you more details about that in a minute. A brief update on the Clinical Forecast Advisory Team and CTSM Consortium. Real-time visibility across Clinical Trial Network, again, update from that team. I'm going to pick up where we left off about KPIs and end-to-end inputs and outputs. It was a good discussion at the last meeting, and I think it raised more questions than answers, and I'd like to circle back to that and see if we can fill in some of the missing pieces to that topic. Next, if there's time, open forum to let people throw out any questions or challenges or problems they're working on to enable folks on this call to share their experience or expertise on that matter. And then lastly, pick a date for our next meeting. So on to events for this year. So as most of you are aware, we have our monthly steering committee meeting the third Thursday of each month. I expect we'll do one next month, acknowledging that August is a difficult time of year to do it. But one primary reason for doing the August is yours truly won't be around for the September one, and like to use next month's meeting to stay on track for the October 20th annual conference. There's also some webinars that I highlighted here. Most of you are aware that we had our first webinar on clinical forecasting back in April, followed by a similar topic held by 4G on May 11th. And JP, I'd like to pause for a minute and give you the opportunity to put a plug in for your webinar that's scheduled for July 28th.
I would expect, that everybody has signed up already. So I'm not sure if I need to make this, but so what we did on May 11 is more conceptually talking about forecasting and where the industry is more on the traditional push model, and so we made a case for transitioning to more in pull kind of strategies. I think that was well appreciated. We got some good feedback on it, and basically what we want to, I think it's not July 28 anymore. I think it's moved to August, but I'm not fully sure.
Okay.
But in August, we will do more a kind of a round table setting. So not so much a one-way discussion, but a groups discussion, really to talk about, what the challenges are that people are experiencing today in transitioning into a more pool strategy. So hopefully there are some participants that have some good experiences with just-in-time or other principles. And so then hopefully we can have a good discussion there.
Okay, thank you, JP. Any questions for him?
So I basically expect you all coming over there.
That's right, and your staffs. Okay, so stay tuned. Feel free to check the BSMA website for other events that are being sponsored by some of the other steering committees within BSMA, as well as for the correct date, I guess, from for the forecasting event.
I'll check it right now. I'll let you know.
Okay, so you heard me mention about the October 20th annual conference. We're working behind the scenes now on topics and speakers for that event. And the first event that I wanted to give Luke a minute to talk about is a workshop. So unlike events that we've had in the past at this annual conference, where the morning is typically guest speakers at an executive level talking about what I would call executive level topics, the plan here is, in addition to that, in the morning to reserve a room for clinical supply chain to have a workshop. And Luke has graciously agreed to help facilitate that topic. And Luke, if you would mind just giving a minute to enlighten people about what we're planning to discuss during that event.
Sure, Bill. Yeah, so, as Bill mentioned, we'll kind of break it out, and we're kind of thinking everyone who's doing this job or working in clinical supplies probably learned it on the job. That seemed to kind of be my experience anyway. And so when I've gone to conferences before, it's always about the new flashy thing or the new breakthrough ERP bit or whatever. And particularly for the size and scope of the companies that are in the Bay Area, there's a lot of new companies and there's a lot of people who are probably just learning this. So we thought, why not make something that's accessible to the startup, to the early sort of clinical supply chain people that are just beginning their journey, to just hammer some fundamentals and give them some good tools to do a lot with maybe a little. And so it's really going to be the basics of creating a forecast and those different pieces, all of the things that we talk about on a grand scale, but just in a small, accessible way, so that folks might be able to leave and make a direct impact on the work they're doing. So.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Luke.
Sure.
And just to stress, this will be educational, informative, not just for newcomers to clinical supply chain, but I think regardless of your level, you would find this informative.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another panel discussion being scheduled.
Ask a question, Luke. How many participants can you facilitate?
I think it's about 60, right, Bill?
Yeah, the room was booked for 60 people.
60?
Yeah, that's correct.
Whoa. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, if we get that number, that's great. I'm sure that some of it will be reinforcement, and then for others, you don't know what you don't know. It's but really just sort of accessible we were tossing around like actually building an Excel forecasts together, just with a couple tips and tricks, so that they can actually walk away almost like with a door prize. It's like, okay, here's something that I can use right now, or just hammer some of those fundamentals, because they're not at a place where they're implementing big forecasting tools or ERP systems or blockchain or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if the steering committee each brought a cross section of their team, this would become triple digits, the number of participants. So, not that I expect that number, but if last month was a great example of a topic that I think Luke will cover in some detail. Somebody raised the question, how much safety stock should I build for my study?
Right.
And, we could talk about that for hours and still not adequately provide sufficient answer, because as most of you know on the call, it depends. In order to make an informed decision, there's a lot of information that goes into that, not just asking the question, how many patients, what's the enrollment rate, and what percent buffer should I add? Maybe that's the simple answer. Maybe that's what some of the people do, but to get closer to the right number, a lot more inputs and outputs are necessary. And those are the types of things that Luke will help shed some light on during this workshop. Okay, another panel discussion that will be taking place that day will be on clinical forecasting. I have a slide to talk about that, so I'll skip that. Another one is on the end-to-end visibility. Again, I have a different slide for that, so I'll mention that in a couple minutes. We haven't yet started working on this levels of maturity for planning clinical trial drug supplies, but we've all expressed an interest in that, with the focus being, a lot of companies start too late in determining what technology could they use or should they use for clinical demand and supply planning. And I think even within this steering committee, we have examples where they're starting their implementation well after their first commercial product has been launched, which is basically playing catch up in order to pave the way, with such things as item master data or whatever other information they need to get going on this. So the idea here is to share with the industry, here's what a startup should look like and what and how they should make decisions. This is what a more mature company looks like, and then so on and so forth. So hopefully that will give people the information and just as importantly, the tools to justify to their management the funds they need, the resources they need in order to select the tools at the right time. And the last topic there, direct to patient challenges and solutions. Again, I don't have a lot of information to share about that event now, other than to acknowledge that it's a lot of people are asking for us to include that at the conference. So any other questions, comments, topics that you think we should try to get onto this October 20th event?
For one day, it's already a lot of topics.
It is.
Is it planned to be a hybrid with some in-person kind of setting?
Yes, it will be both virtual and in person.
Question. I know in previous meetings, we've talked a lot about cell and gene therapy and And there seems to be a resurgence of interest among big pharma about cell and gene therapy, more focused on allogeneic and autologous Tregs and NK cells. Is there any thought to look at that holistically from a supply chain perspective, because it involves not only identification of these Tregs cell systems and NK cells, but also scale up and granted that some of them are maybe not yet into humans, but they are getting there maybe in a few years.
Yeah, so Ravi, the short answer is yes. There's actually a new steering committee within BSMA around gene therapy. They're actually scheduled to have a almost full day event coming up shortly.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But they will also have their own topics around around gene therapy at the October 20th event. But to just add to one comment that you said is I agree that it's too soon, since that committee has just started to predict the supply chain planning, how our steering committee, which is about commercial and clinical, but I think we all see most of our time is spent about clinical supply chain planning. It's too soon to say how we connect with gene therapy. As somebody who, before I retired from BioMarin, supported, well, at the time we had 2 gene therapy products. Now they have more than that. I do acknowledge there are some differences in some of the challenges and ways of going about planning with gene therapy versus some of the other types of drugs, but not as many differences as I think people perceive them to be. Because if we get right down to it, I think everybody's expected to, supply drug as quickly as possible. Yeah. I think the only big difference is it's one and done. Yeah. For many of the gene therapy. So you can't use historical data to predict what your demand and supply requirements are. So you just have to be better at gathering the intelligence to make sure you've got what you need when you need it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so at the last meeting, I mentioned to many of you that we're continuing to work on improving the BSMA website. We already have a link to each of the steering committees that include the names of the members and links to the slides and recordings of each of our events. We are now working on a chat room that will enable people to log in and ask questions, provide answers for not just the members, but for anybody in the industry. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time because it's still under development. But what I'm wanted to do just is to first just give you a quick view of it. And as you can see that, it will, for registered people, and I'll explain more about that offline between now and the next meeting, it will enable people to come in, pose questions, pose answers, and provide posts on relevant topics. So
are you planning to come up with certain categories or just open field?
Thank you for asking that question. Here you go.
Ah.
So to get this thing started, I provided 9 categories: clinical supply forecasting and demand planning. And the red is basically just an example that I provided the IT people for, just to kind of get this thing tested. So there'll be a topic about clinical supply forecasting, demand planning. JP, your favorite topic? IXRS, clinical systems and technology solutions, clinical processes and best practices, blinded studies, direct-to-patient challenges, clinical packaging and labeling, clinical drug accountability, and cold chain and logistics. So I'm as soon as this chat room is ready for sharing, I'm going to be sending out an email to all of you, and my ask will be to test it. What I'd like to do is to ask each of you to kind of go in, play with it, start asking questions, giving answers, so we can kick the tires and work out any bugs if they exist. And then it will be ready for prime time, and we will do a lot of promoting on this to enable anybody and anyone in the industry who chooses to use it. All it will require is them registering for being able to use it.
Are you planning on putting in some, I wouldn't say rules, but best practices on how to deal with this? And the reason why I'm asking, so I guess you guys know, I also work with GCSD, and we have a kind of similar kind of solution there. But what we really want to prevent, at least I would assume BSMA is also into that we don't have vendors doing commercial activities.
That's a good point, and we'll need to figure that out. I mean, I know that in order to get into this, you have to register. So, either A, we'll have to figure out when somebody registers, but I don't think that is a fail-safe method. Or 2, it will require somebody to play the role of admin to kind of make sure that if they see something like that, that they kick that, they delete that chat and remove that person or company from being able to use the chat room.
Yeah, if there's just in a kind of welcome page some basic principles of what the intention of the chat is and what it's not intended for, I think then you can hold people accountable. If somebody is, by accident doing something that is not meeting the expectation, you can give them a warning. But then, if they continue, you can kick them out.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Thanks for saying that. And I'm sure there are other things that will need to be figured out that haven't been thought about yet. So just one other question about this. These 9 topics was just a starting point for me. Are there any other areas that people would like to see added?
I think to Ravi's point, maybe in another category could be around the cell and gene supply chain, which, I heard what you said, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty and people are not seeing them as kind of similar.
Okay, got that one down. Any other comments from you or anyone else on the call? Okay, so if you think of any later on, feel free to just email me. Okay, Dan Silver was planning to provide an update on the next 2 slides, but about an hour ago, he informed me that he has another, wasn't unable to join this call. So he provided me an update to where this team is. So the clinical forecasting advisory team, as I like to call them, first met to put together a panel discussion in April, and which went off very well. I can't remember exactly the number, but I think it was about 80 people on that webinar. And they continue to collaborate and are currently working on a panel discussion for the October 20th event. So last week, they picked their topic, which is stochastic versus determination planning. For those of you, which to some degree is me, don't know what that means, it's basically simulation planning versus calculation planning, and even that I feel isn't giving justice to the to its meaning. But stay tuned; you'll learn more about that at the October 20th event. And JP, I consider you a subject matter expert on some of the tools and processes that this team might want to share with the audience. So if you're interested in becoming part of this team or this event, feel free to email myself or Dan Silva.
Sure. This is near and dear to my heart. So
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
And I guess Adam loves this as well. This is definitely in the space where he's very experienced.
Okay. Good to know. All right. So any questions about this event? Okay. All right, just a brief update on the CTMS consortium. They're continuing to add new members to their group. The most recent members, BeiGene, AbbVie, Astellas, and a few others that are in discussions and likely to join. I know from folks on the call that JP is one of our IXRS vendors who's also on this consortium. And they continue to be meeting depending on their people's level of involvement in this group, some daily, some weekly, some monthly. And the topics that they're focusing on right now is serialization, and at their next monthly call, clinical labeling. So just to step back for a minute, why am I bringing this up? Because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about the consortium over the past 2 or 3 months. But when we started, one of the objectives of BSMA and CTSM was to leverage the membership base of BSMA to help funnel to CTSM some of the wants and needs of its members. And by that I mean, many of, if not most of the CTSM members are the larger, and in many cases, more mature pharma companies, most of which already have a technology solution, typically SAP, and most of you might know that the BSMA members, many do not have a technology solution yet. Some have solutions besides SAP, such as Oracle, and have wants and needs that are different than the companies that are currently members of CTSM. So the request from 10th Pin was for us to get connected with them through this steering committee, so that we could provide to them, what are the requirements that they should understand. And in a lot of ways, the information that comes out of not just this call, but our webinars is what they're listening to and applying to their future versions, so that this can become a wider uh, solution for the industry. And with that said, that's one of the focuses of this slide that I'm sharing here, which is what I'm calling real-time visibility across the clinical network.
Bill-
One of the drivers of the 10th Pin SAP initiative is to provide better visibility of data, not just within each company, but within the clinical network, so that people can make better informed decisions. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, JP, one of the reasons why IXRS vendors are part of this consortium is because that IXRS is a critical input to enable companies to forecast better, plan better, manage their inventory better. So with that said, what you're seeing on this slide is a list of companies from our steering committee that have been meeting regularly to help advance this concept for the industry, because this, in order for the idea of providing real-time visibility across the network to succeed, it not only needs SAP people or I should say, pharma companies who are part of the SAP 10th Pin Roche initiative to understand and embrace this idea. It requires the whole industry, from the pharma companies, the startup companies included, as well as the network of suppliers. So this next slide, I believe, is primarily language provided by JP, which describes the problem statement that we're looking to solve, which is supply chain doesn't have real-time visibility to demand, supply, and inventories throughout the end-to-end supply chain due to disconnected systems or lack of using specialized systems. As a result, decisions around producing drug and triggers to manufacturers and distributors about supplies through the supply chain may come too late, or worse, not at all, causing insufficient inventories and scrap and putting patients in studies at risk. The vision of the industry, particularly 10th Pins, is identify a common process and data model aligning the pharma and biotech clinical supply industry to achieve seamless collaboration and information exchange throughout the supply network. Our objective, meaning BSMA's, we're not going to provide the technical solution, but more of an education, help move the industry towards achieving the desired end state by educating its members and their supplier base about this vision, including its benefits and the problems it solves, in creating a call to action that motivates them to support and act on this vision. So where are we? Well, we're in what I would call data collection mode. BSMA has contracted an individual who's currently been collecting data to help quantify, what does this problem, if you will, mean? What's it cost? What service problems are we encountering because of this lack of visibility? And again, I repeat the example that I repeated last month. Again, thanks to Mary Jo on this one, is based on an research that she was instrumental in collecting. 55% of drug produced for clinical studies is wasted. As a matter of fact, I received another some more information just 2 days ago from another company who feels that number is even greater than that. They're quoting 85%. But
Did they
anyway,
gather data on that, Bill?
well, they did. I'll share with you the email from them. The data they have is basically their own, just based on the numbers they've pulled from their pharma customers.
Okay.
So, so anyway, we're collecting data to quantify the implications of having lack of visibility, and then looking for examples or case studies of what companies have done to address and improve those capabilities. And the idea is to share that information with BSMA members and, well, any attendees, if you will, at the October 20th event. So, you know, that's one strategy. We will have others besides that, but, you know, that's where we get out of the gate, so to speak, and say, okay, this is what this initiative is all about. This is why it's important. This is why we as an industry need to embrace and help address it, and then we'll continue to build on it from there. So for those of you that haven't yet, there is a survey, or I guess it was just a request to answer 3 questions that was sent out to, I think, all of you by now. Thanks for those of you who have answered. But I'm asking with a please, if you could, to please respond to that request, because it's very important for us to gather that, especially the examples of what each of you might have done in your current role or in your past roles, of examples of solutions that you put in place that have enabled you to make better and informed decisions, which ultimately helped address your forecasting or your supply planning or your distribution or whatever the process is that helped improve your clinical supply planning capabilities.
Oh, Bill, is that gonna, JP had written in an email, is that gonna go out to the database? Because there was an issue about vendors versus pharma biotech companies in terms of crafting the question.
Well, no, right now we've only sent that question to this steering committee and the BSMA advisory team. So it has not nearly as thorough a survey, but this contractor who we've hired there, you know, what he's also doing besides just sending this email request to, well, let's say about 20 or 30 of you, is to just research whatever search engines he has about reports, articles, data, whatever it is that he can get his hands on to help reinforce the message and the solutions. If you're okay with it, Mary Jo, you know, I might ask for a conference call between him, you, and me, just to kind because I think you might have a better idea of some of these search engines
Sure.
that we can look into.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. During our last call, and I mentioned this at the beginning of this call, a couple people started asking the question. When I showed this slide about KPIs, I guess I wasn't clear. Why are we talking about KPIs? Or I'm not in one sort of inferred. KPIs might be helpful for the more established companies that have the technology and the tools to capture it. But we're all about, we're planning off of Excel, and our primary objective isn't to become more efficient or to lower costs, but it's making sure we don't run out of drug, plain and simple. So I just wanted to address that thought by saying that BSMA is all about addressing the wants and needs of any size bio or pharma company at any maturity level, and we acknowledge that today most of its members don't have the technology and the tools. Most of them are planning off of Excel. But the point remains is that having KPIs is important regardless of your maturity level. And I for one acknowledge that it's difficult to capture these, even for the most mature companies, but they're important. And so the direction that I'm planning to take to address this is to help people understand, why are metrics important, which starts with what are the inputs and outputs? Why do they matter? How do I measure these? What do I do with that information? And ultimately, it can answer, questions which on the surface sounds simple, which is how much extra inventory should I build for a clinical study? But as people heard me say at the beginning of the call, some can say, oh, just add 15, 20%. And maybe that's what a lot of companies are doing today. But the idea here is that in order to ensure you have enough drug at the right place at the right time, and you build it at the right time, while 15 to 20% might get you there, given the complexity of supply chain planning and forecasting, the better way of answering that question is to understand the whole picture of end-to-end, the inputs, the outputs, what things will influence the accuracy of your forecast, the accuracy and what your lead times are, and so forth.
I think that's the biggest thing, Bill, is understanding cycle times and lead times, and the amount of time it takes to react is everything that you need to begin to reduce inventory. And because if you can react to forecast variability, you need to understand exactly how long it will take you to react. If you're not tracking that information, then the default, which is sort of almost just like I know it's hard, right? But it's kind of like a cop out just to say, well, I'll just make more. And then that way, I'll be covered if something goes differently than it is. But I mean, I think that we have an obligation as to our companies and to our patients to actually get better at understanding exactly what those times are, because then you say like it's just like we want to just make sure that we have enough drug, but if you're taking up that inventory, if you're spending those resources, then you're not manufacturing another drug. You're not working on a different thing. You're taking up space that's unneeded. Yeah, I mean, think about lean, right? I mean, excess inventory is the greatest of all the waste because it leads to every other waste. And so I think if they say they don't care about metrics, then I think they're misguided there. It's stuff that we got to know.
Yeah.
And
very
saying it's
well.
hard is
Yeah.
like, what they're saying is it's not worth it, because if it was worth it, then it doesn't matter how hard it is, right?
Very well put. Very well put. Yeah. So basically, what we're working on again behind the scenes, and actually the lion's share of the work for this is being done by Schrocken, who is on our end-to-end team, is they're working on identifying and defining what these inputs and outputs are. So going back to what Luke said, knowing that the October 20th event is going to include a workshop, which in a lot of ways will give people either the fundamentals, or if they already have them, reinforce and provide some additional information about some of the inputs and outputs that are, if not essential, useful at the very least, to help determine how to plan and how to forecast. And then in the afternoon, this will be reinforced by providing additional information about the end-to-end inputs and outputs, so that people will have, let's call it a better toolbox, if you will, of understanding the, some of the key factors in being successful at determining how much drug to forecast and produce and ship and store and everything about it.
Yeah,
So
it's ambitious, Bill. You're talking about something that's ambitious, and if we try to cover everything, then essentially we end up covering nothing in a meaningful way, right? So I mean, I would say let's just kind of focus on some of those things. And if you want to say, all right, if understanding safety stock is like a goal, right? Like a sort of goal across the sessions, that by the end of the day, we build those fundamentals and then we understand safety stock. I think that maybe you focus in on those things that are really going to drive safety stock, forecast accuracy being one of them, but cycle time, lead time being another major contributor there. And then as far as the forecast accuracy, we got to start with admitting that our forecasts are inaccurate and understand that we can only focus on what the range is, what it could be at the most, and what it might be at the least. And then those things will enable us to do the safety stock calculations in a way that's meaningful. That'll tie into the push versus pull question as well. So I mean, it's all those different pieces, but I wouldn't say like metrics is something that makes people go, whoa, right? But it's just like, if we want to talk about manufacturing cycle times as a metric to focus on this thing, then I think that that'll get us a little bit further in a way that's congruent to the other topics that you're looking to cover. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so let me, I'm glad you said that, because you're right. On the surface, what I've implied here is that, this would be way too much information to try to cram in one day. So I'm going to remind myself that, the BSMA and their steering committee, it's a journey that, that if I remind myself, that our objective is to help identify and disseminate best practices and share what are the standards in the industry that we should all try to migrate to, based on your maturity level, that that we see the workshop event and even this end-to-end inputs and outputs topic as a starting point, that that, hey, people should know these things are important, and why, and over time start feeding them additional detail, because I know that we could, just like we mentioned last call, that we could spend a whole day talking about accountability and reconciliation and still not do justice. Same applies to forecasting, same applies to KPIs.
I agree. I mean, my first clinical supply chain job was in 1997, and I learned something new every day. You can't give people all the answers in a one-day session. If they walk away thinking differently about one impactful aspect of what they do, then that's a win, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's the overarching point here is, when somebody asks that question, how much extra safety stock should I build? To say, well, you can say 50 to 20%, and that might get you in the ballpark.
Well, you keep saying that. I'm wondering if you're talking about overage and not safety stock, because there's a difference.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah,
I'm saying overage.
So if you ask me how much overage you should apply, I would say 0. But you build a safety stock threshold that sort of allows you to react to changes in your forecast. So safety stock is just as much a signal, or it's included within the reorder trigger, to sort of say I got to move, and the safety stock is the buffer to account for the fluctuation that could happen in your lead times or your demand to get you to that resupply. So the idea, I think, but this is great, Bill, because it's a common thing that people mix up. When someone says safety stock, other people hear overage, and they're not the same. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I mean, even if you walk away with that at the end of the day, that's a good thing. And I'm not saying, because this is a very commonly misunderstood concept. Sorry for
no.
get off my soapbox.
That is good. Okay, so I'm not going to beat this slide to death because there's too much information in it to spend more time on in this call, but just to kind of plant the bug for future topics. Okay, we're running short on time, so I wanted to ask 2 questions. One is this date, which is the 3rd Thursday of the month, okay for our next meeting? And B, is there anything that people would like to see included in next month's agenda that maybe we didn't have enough time to cover now or haven't thought to add in the past?
I won't
guess
be
the
able to
question.
make 19. That's okay.
Well, I didn't hear what you said, JP.
I said I won't be able to make the 19th. I will be on vacation that week.
Okay. Well, I figure all of Europe shuts down in August, no?
Almost.
So Bill, is there a session where we're gonna like sort of hammer through or finalize the event agenda? Is that something that would happen here in the steering committee, or is that a separate sort of exercise? Because I think it's probably that maybe that would be time well spent in the next meeting.
Yeah, I will add that to there. I mean, yeah, that's it. Some of those topics I think you're close enough to know that we've got people behind the scenes starting to work on them. And there's a couple that I'm acknowledging no progress or speakers have spoken to. But in those cases, I know Devendra has been speaking with some people offline. So,
Okay,
but anyway,
that's just an
worth,
idea.
having
Yep.
a conversation about. Okay. All right, so I'm going to end here. And again, thanks everybody for joining this call, and thanks for your ideas. And again, keep sharing your ideas and input with me, both during these calls as well as feel free to call me or email me in between them, because this is all about providing what you folks want. And hopefully we're doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks
Thank you
for
so much.
taking the lead on this.
Have a great day.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.